Now that season 1 of HBO's super cool sci-fi series Raised by Wolves has come to an end, showrunner, show creator, main scriptwriter, and the true Saul of the Raised by Wolves universe, Aaron Guzikowski, has been doing the rounds on the interview circuit to discuss what he can about what exactly is going on in this mysterious show. Well, I came across an interview he did with Collider where he was pretty open about a lot of the mysteries we've been discussing on this channel. So I thought it would be fun to play clips from the video and interject with my thoughts and theories, since Aaron could not give exact answers to a lot of the questions without spoiling Season 2 and beyond. Hey everyone, I'm Brent the Middleman, your middle-aged middle manager in Middle America, here today with a video breaking down Collider's interview with showrunner and show creator Aaron Guzikowski. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss any of my Raised by Wolves videos I will be posting during the break between seasons. And heads up for spoilers for Season 1 and possibly beyond. So go grab your skin-tight gray spandex spacesuits and let's get to it. First, let me just tell everyone, Aaron Guzikowski is the mind behind Raised by Wolves. I have seen a number of people in the comments say that this show relates to other Ridley Scott projects like Alien and Prometheus, but that is not the case. Yes, there are aliens and androids and other planets and white android blood, but other than that, there is no connection to Ridley Scott other than the fact that he directed an episode. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to quickly discuss some answers we got that weren't big enough to warrant playing a clip. Aaron says that he has a 5 to 6 season arc mapped out for the show, and he definitely knows how the show will end. This is awesome news, and I really hope HBO gives him the chance to carry out his full vision. It's also comforting to know that there is a firm direction for the show because we have seen what happens when shows lose their way. He also says that we will be seeing a lot more of the planet in Season 2, including the tropical zone, and the cast will be growing, most likely from the atheist arc we saw arriving in the finale. He also made it sound like Season 2 will be 8 episodes instead of 10, but they are still figuring it out. Finally, Aaron says that the snake we see at the end of Season 1 is pretty much full grown, and despite his love for Godzilla, having it get any larger would be impractical. So that's it for the more minor topics that were covered. Now let's jump into the interview, and as I said earlier, I'll be popping in after each question and answer to give my thoughts about the topic. Okay, here we go.
The season 1 finale, you introduce Mother's Baby, which is not at all what people are expecting. I am curious if the baby is a smaller version of the creature we see in episode 1 of the fossil of that snake.
It is that breed of snake with some differences. It's a hybrid version of that. Yes, there is definitely a connection there. It's definitely DNA is in common, but there is a little bit of a difference because this one comes from mother, so it has, some attributes that some of the snakes that originally existed on the planet do not.
This confirms that Mother's snake and the snakes that used to roam around on Kepler have the same DNA. So the same father, essentially. Mother's snake has a different mouth and can fly, though, because it has some of Mother's powers. I wonder what other awful powers it inherited from Mother, as if a giant flying snake wasn't terrifying enough. We know Mother can get into people's heads and make them explode or make them see things much like Saul can. We have actually seen her either turn into Campion's sister or get in Campion's head to make him think he is seeing and hearing his sister, and jury is still out on exactly how that power works, but we may get a hint later in the interview, so stay tuned.
You mentioned that basically the humans got blueprints for essentially Mother and just built without really knowing what was this final function. How much is that a hint towards things to come?
It's a big hint for sure. And there's definitely, I think, we lay out in Season 1 sort of this kind of mystery in terms of where did this technology come from? The Mithraic, discovered it, encrypted in their scriptures were these blueprints, essentially, these designs for various technologies, which they proceeded to build and then use to almost won this war. I mean, they basically did win the war, but they also forced the end of the world in the process. So that we do know. We do know that there is some, and we also know that there seems to be a connection between some of that technology and what we have found so far on Kepler 22b.
He says it's a mystery where the blueprints that were encrypted in the scriptures came from, which seems to imply they came from Kepler. He also says they discovered various technologies, which makes it seem like there were plans for more than just the necromancers. I assume that means the arcs, and probably the prison helmet we saw in Otho. This backs up my theory that Otho's helmet was intended to feed Mother's baby with its blood draw function. It also explains how people heard voices on the Ark, because the Ark was made from dark photon technology, which Saul seems to be able to speak through. It also backs my theory that Saul re-emerged on Kepler when the Ark got near and then crashed. Saul needed the power from the technology to get stronger. Later in the interview, you will hear Aaron say that the atheists hijacked the Ark they arrive on at the end from the Mithraic, so that will mean extra dark photon power for Saul. I think it's possible Saul wanted to re-emerge on Earth and came very close with the Mithraic winning the war, but the atheists destroyed the planet with nuclear bombs. Saul may still emerge on Earth and Kepler, since all of the necromancers are still on Earth, which we'll hear more about later on in the interview.
I'm curious, why does everyone go to the planet that everyone is going to? Is that from the scriptures? Is that...
Yeah. I think in the scriptures, there, in addition to all these technological blueprints, there is, actual, coordinates for this planet as well. And it also happens to be, I think, that plus the idea that, throughout their own, space exploration, satellites and this and that, they know that this is the only place to go where you can survive without the aid of technology. All the other possibilities apparently have been crossed off the list by this time.
So the scriptures mention Kepler 22b, which confirms that the scripture information did come from there. He also says that the humans eliminated all other options, which could mean that only Earth and Kepler are hospitable to our type of life. That is why this cycle between Earth and Kepler exists, because they are the only planets we can live on, and that is why they are a part of Saul's life cycle, which takes place on timescales we cannot even begin to comprehend.
In the future seasons, do you plan on showing more on what happened to Earth and sort of what built to where we are?
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be more flashbacks and perhaps, some present day Earth peaks as well. See what might be going on there after, after everything is over, because there are still necromancers on Earth. They were left behind, most of them. The Mithraic obviously didn't want to bring any with them. They were done with them. It didn't trust them. So they left them on Earth, except for the one they found waiting for them on 22B. So there is that.
Okay, so not only will we see flashbacks to events on Earth before Season 1, but also what is going on there in the present day. A planet full of necromancers with no atheists to kill. Well, I take that back. The atheists may learn to avoid them or hide underground, which is a lot like what may have happened on Kepler. The snakes roaming around looking for non-believers in Saul, so the humans had to evolve to live underground and avoid the snakes, seemingly devolving. Maybe Saul and the snakes cannot get inside a more primitive brain to make it explode or give it visions. So on Earth, we may see over time the leftover humans devolving so they can survive on a planet covered in necromancers. Or maybe I'm reading too much into this answer.
With stuff like the voice of Saul, which has affected certain people, do you know how all of that is going to play out in terms of, because obviously with Travis's character, he's going kind of crazy,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, he is. And, with Travis, it's interesting, Travis's character, because he was a little bit crazy when he got there. You know what I mean? He was already a former child soldier who then changed his face and spent 12 years pretending to be this, religious captain, and, has all of these issues to begin with. And then he starts hearing the voice and goes, where he goes. But I think that's kind of a clue, the idea that, if you really look at it, there is some connection to be made in terms of who hears the voice and when, and how many. I think only one person can hear it at a time.
So someone has to already have a certain mindset in order to be susceptible to Saul's voice. Otho and Paul were extreme believers, so it makes sense that they'd assume the voice was Saul and follow his orders. Marcus, however, was an atheist, and we saw that he took a bit more convincing to actually become a believer. But after getting stabbed by himself, he fully bought into the voice. The other interesting comment is that only one person can hear the voice at a time. Maybe Saul is actually jumping from person to person, infecting their mind like a computer virus, since our brains are basically advanced computers made up of electrical signals. I also wonder if Saul then leaves a host, can it then go back, or does it have to find someone new? Lots of questions raised by this one answer.
Are you willing to say who actually impregnated Mother?
I can't say who, but I can say how. I think she was digitally impregnated while she was inside of the simulation. So being that she is advanced as she is, just by getting this, basically the instructions for how to build something, inside of herself, it's like a 3D printer. And if she can get the materials, in this case, one of the materials is plasma, human blood, to build this thing, it can be done, in a very different way than, a human being would create a baby. She could kind of create anything inside of herself if given, the proper instructions and given the right materials.
That confirms that Mother was not impregnated exactly. She was infected with a kind of computer virus that downloaded the instructions for creating the snake. This builds on the theory that Saul is a type of program or artificial intelligence that has gained sentience.
Obviously, with her eyes, that's how she becomes the necromancer. What is it about? Have you sort of thought about the technology with the eyes and how this all works? Because without the eyes, she can be killed in a millisecond.
Yeah, she's vulnerable without the eyes. The eyes are sort of like the plutonium, in the bomb. It's like she has all of the circuitry. You need all of that stuff. If you just have the eyes, it's just kind of like you have some plutonium in your hands. But they are essential. It's kind of like, or if you have some, hardware and you need like a dongle to make it work, sort of thing. It's that kind of idea. So she has a lot of stuff, built into her body, but it can't be, utilized and activated without the eyes.
If Mother cannot activate all the powers inside of her without her eyes, I wonder if Saul has a similar weakness. Maybe his power cannot be activated without the snakes, or without technology around, and that is why we didn't hear about Saul until the Ark neared Kepler. Or maybe the temples on Kepler have something to do with Saul's power, and he could be destroyed that way.
When you guys were writing season 1, when you're figuring it all out, there had to have been maybe possibly some changes, things you thought you were going to do that maybe for budget or for time or whatever reason you couldn't pull off. Can you share any of that?
I'm trying to think. I think there were some things that, I think in addition to Mother's other abilities, and you see a little bit of it in the pilot, she is able to kind of make people see things that aren't there, when she makes Campion see her as his dead sibling. So there were a few more moments where she was making people see things that weren't there, that were very expensive. That didn't get done. Yeah.
This may seem like a minor point, but it actually tells us a lot about how Mother's powers and possibly Saul's powers work. Mother is not changing herself to look like another person. She is getting inside the person's head and making them see something that isn't there. This could explain how Saul gives people visions and makes them hear its voice. It also could explain why Saul can only do this to one person at a time, because he has to be inside the person's head and he can only be in one head at a time.
Can you say any more about the 5-sided ship that is in the desert?
Oh, yes, the pentagonal temple. Well, I can say this. I can say that there are more of them, that, according to the scriptures, there's 5 of them. There's 5 of them, and in each of them is supposed to be hidden the answers to the sort of the ultimate, the Mithraic mysteries, the thing everybody's trying to get to the bottom of. But beyond that, I can't tell you too much more, except that we will see we'll see another in season 2, and I think we'll get a lot more kind of into what it is and how it works and all that good stuff.
Big reveal that there are 5 pentagonal temples around the planet. I assume he means we will see the temple that is in the tropical zone next season, and he says we will see how they work. My theory is that they are mini versions of the planet's core, filled with dark photons, and they can seem to grant wishes or prayers, but it's really Saul manipulating the dark photons to give the person what they want in order to win over believers. But even if I'm wrong, I'm psyched to find out what they can do in Season 2.
What should people take from the visions Mother sees in the finale with the creatures by the hole in the ground and the other thing that I can't even describe in what could be like a robot suit? I don't even know what that is.
Yes, I can actually, I mean, that I feel like I can illuminate a little bit in terms of what it is. So basically, when she has that dream and she sees that thing and that weird kind of helmet robot head thing, and, it starts to, the fuel blood starts gushing out of the front of it, kind of the nozzle on the front. What that is, there is actually an android inside of that. It's sort of like a birthing prison sort of thing. So their body's inside the pentagonal bottom half. The top piece is a helmet that goes over the android. And the android then births a serpent out the nozzle. So that's essentially what that is. That's kind of what she's seeing, this kind of foreshadowing of what's about to happen to her, but she can't quite put it together, but until the very last moment when it's too late.
Well, there is confirmation that it was an android under the helmet and that the helmet functioned as a birthing tube. This may also put to bed the theory that it is actually her own head that Mother found. It was just foreshadowing for the mouth birth that was about to come.
Finale, you have the cave that Paul goes into. You see Mother and Father's ship. You see other things on the wall that are almost moving. Can you go into more detail about that?
Not too much, except the idea that obviously there was this is not a virgin planet, as we're coming to discover. There was a civilization here. And here we're seeing imagery that does suggest on some level that something that we know to have happened 13 years ago, here we see depicted on a cave that was, a drawing that was made several 100,000 years ago. And how can that be? So I think that's sort of the question is kind of presented there, but I can't answer it. But I mean, that's what it is.
Not too much information here, but saying that the cave drawings may be a few 100,000 years old just confirms that Saul operates on insanely large timescales, and when he told Mother he has been alone for so long, he really wasn't kidding.
Have there been other races that have responded to the message that obviously we got on planet Earth that have arrived on this planet prior to humans?
I would say this is more of a human-centric story in that sense. Yes, I would say. So I would say no.
Okay.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and just answer that one.
Got it.
This answer tells me that Saul's life cycle revolves between Earth and Kepler, perhaps originating on Kepler, moving to Earth, and now back to Kepler, like salmon returning from the ocean to the place of their birth.
I've been very curious for the entire season why Campion has not been affected by the radioactive food. Yeah. How much of a story point is that going to be as the series continues?
A fairly significant one, yeah. I think it definitely has a lot to do with his destiny on this planet and the role he's going to play in the future. But I can't, and I will say it definitely it's not so concealed in terms of the why of it all. You know what I mean? I think it is something we could potentially figure out on some level. But yeah, it will get. We definitely deal with it down the line, and it pays off in a significant way.
Very interesting. They are obviously setting Campion up to be special and a leader. He isn't a pure atheist, and he believes all living creatures have souls. He also seems to be destined to be on Kepler, as his body is not affected by radiation. Could that mean that he is not able to be affected by Saul either? Will this allow him to be able to enter the pentagonal temples or pass through the core when other humans cannot? He did see Tally, but he knew it wasn't Tally, and he wasn't fooled. Could Campion be the one to unite humans, animals, and androids against Saul? Could Campion show Saul that humanity deserves mercy? Lots of questions. Hopefully we get lots of answers in season 2.
What, how is Marcus, how is our future seasons with Marcus, with the way he is mentally right now, how is that sort of going to play out in season 2? What can you tease?
Well, I think he's definitely, he's gone as crazy as one can go. So the question is where do you go from there, and kind of what's the next step? He's kind of been broken down to nothing. He was this man who was he grew up on Earth as a child soldier. He was completely powerless, and he got to this planet. Suddenly he was hearing a voice and everyone was worshiping him, and he lost his mind, essentially. In the process, though, he's kind of been broken down into this, into his most, essential elements, as it were. So I think in season 2, we're going to see a sort of a rebirth, as it were, sort of a new, he's going to kind of redefine himself in season 2.
So we saw Caleb, an atheist and a survivor, become Marcus and pretend to be a high-ranking Mithraic soldier, his sworn enemy, then spend 12 years with them on a ship in space. Then he hears the voice of Saul and goes from being an orphan child soldier to being worshipped. He ends the season as a true believer, turning on the atheists that made it to Kepler. So what could rebirth look like for Marcus in season 2? I could see him being a soldier for Saul. At his core, he is a soldier, and now he has something to believe in. Or I could see him going full Matthew McConaughey and Reign of Fire, but instead of dragons, he hunts and kills giant snakes. So we'll see.
Everyone throughout the season sees visions. They see things, some of the kids that have previously died. What can you say about these visions that everyone has been seeing?
Obviously, I think that they're all significant. I think there's obviously something on this planet that if you're tuned into a certain wavelength, you are able to see things that might be coming. But beyond that, I can't say too much about it. I think those sorts of things are kind of what they are.
It's interesting that he said you need to be tuned into a certain wavelength, which means only certain people can have the visions. This seems to add to the theory that Saul is like a computer virus, infecting certain people who are open to accepting it, just like certain people are more open to belief. So far, Mother, Father, Campion, Paul, and Marcus have had visions while on the planet, with Otho hearing a voice on the Ark. Mother and Father are androids. Campion was born on Kepler and incubated by Mother's fuel blood. Marcus was recruited to be a soldier at an extremely young age. He completely changed his face and his identity and lived in this other life for over a decade. These people have had extreme existences, which could put them in tune with Saul's wavelength. On the other hand, Paul has had a relatively normal life. If you call having to leave Earth to be raised in a simulation while in hypersleep by 2 people who look like his parents but aren't his parents, only to be kidnapped by a necromancer while thinking everyone he knows died in a fiery explosion on a distant planet, a normal life, this alone could be enough to put Paul on Saul's wavelength. But Paul said something to his fake mom and dad that caught my attention that may or may not be something important. He told Marcus and Sue that they were acting weird on the Ark because he says his parents never talked to him before. I thought this could mean that Paul is an android, but I think Mother would have noticed when she took out his tracker, or the sim would have said something. There is a chance he is some kind of brand new model that has human blood for realism, but probably not. Nevertheless, there has always been something weird about Paul, so it's not surprising he seems to be Saul's choice to continue talking to for a while.
What's up actually with the planet? Paul tells his mom they have to stay on this side to give birth to the baby.
Yes.
And he says it was Soul that is like, you got to do it on this side.
Yes.
Anything you want to say about that?
Well, I would say, very much like Earth, every region of this planet is very different, so though we know what there is, a lot of what there is to know about the region we spent season 1 in, the rest of the planet is, quite mysterious in terms of all that. So, I think, and also too, I think you have to, I think one could also imagine that other things in terms of the hallucinations, the voice, so on and so forth, when you move to another part of the planet, those things are going to shift as well. That, we're dealing with things that, that seems supernatural, and maybe they are, but I think everything also has a technological aspect to it that you could apply here in a sort of really calculated way.
Is he implying that there are different voices in different areas of the planet? Based on what we've seen, I'd guess that there are 5 regions of the planet, each with a pentagonal temple. Perhaps each temple houses a different form of the dark photon energy, each with its own motivations. On the side we've seen, there is a voice that I've been calling Saul that wanted to use Mother to birth a snake. In the cave drawing Paul found, you can see different swirl patterns inside what looks like Kepler. These patterns also look a lot like Mother and Father's farming patterns, which are similar to the golden ratio. I wonder if these swirls correspond with different regions. These distinct areas could all be in competition, and bringing the necrosnake to the tropical region could be a huge move by the cold side voice to take over that area. Humans are just the pawns in a giant chess game between highly evolved intelligences who operate on galactic timescales. Perhaps each used to be a human or an android that bonded with the dark photons to become one of these beings. In case you couldn't tell, Aaron's answer to this question sparked a lot of fun ideas for me to ponder. Let me know in the comments if it did the same for you.
What can you actually say about the history of the planet that maybe hasn't been revealed in the season, and especially the creatures that are devolving?
Yes, well, I think the one thing we've learned, or one of the things we've learned, are these creatures used to be human beings. And one might even imagine, for all we know, that maybe human beings evolved here first. We don't know. So there is definitely a strong connection with this place and in humanity, as we've come to understand it. But the idea here too is that for some reason, something has caused these human beings to kind of turn around and start going the other direction, devolving, but the question is why. Why would that happen? What purpose would that serve? Or what is that? We don't know, but we do know that that's exactly what it was. This planet was populated by human beings, and for some reason they've all devolved into these more animalistic versions of ourselves, these kind of walking around on all fours, very animalistic, completely devoid of all of the things that, today we, herald as making humans.
Aaron confirms that there were in fact humans on Kepler, and they are devolving into the creatures the Earth people have been eating. He seems to acknowledge that devolving is really strange and that there could be some power forcing this to happen. He asks, what purpose would this serve? Evolution is the way life continues to grow in order to give its offspring the best chance of survival. Well, what if devolving gives its young the best chance at survival because there is an intelligence on the planet that can take over the mind of more highly evolved life? This could be the answer, or it could be something that happens more quickly because of something on Kepler, like dark photon energy, and we may see this play out with Tempest's baby. Saul wanted Otho to impregnate women on the Ark. I think it was partly so he would be in the helmet that could give blood, but I also think something crazy is going to happen with the baby, which I hope we get to see in Season 2.
How did they all survive going through the middle of the planet?
Well, again, it's like you can look at the supernatural possibilities, and then you can look at are there, other things that could be at play here that would make that possible. Because we're saying, okay, this is a planet, and what do we know about planets? And we're applying all of that to this planet. But this planet is very, very far away from this one and may have attributes that our planet does not, despite the fact that, it's a Goldilocks planet, and, on the surface, it does seem to have a lot in common with Earth. But that's on the outside. Like I've said, this planet is kind of like a haunted house, and it's got a whole ton of secrets, a whole lot that goes along with it that, the people who just moved in aren't really aware of yet. So I think that would speak to the, what happens here, this idea that they have passed through, shot out the other side. But again, I would say that this is not like Earth in the sense that taking a trip through the middle of it is patently impossible.
Got it. Well, now I just sort of figured out how you can connect different groups in Season 2 if you can travel through the middle.
Well, it is. Well, yeah, they managed to do it. Yes. So I think it's not. I wouldn't recommend it as just taking a jaunt back and forth. It might not survive, but yes, sure. It can be done.
I love the description of the planet as a haunted house. Just thinking of it that way adds a whole other dimension to the craziness we have been seeing. So he confirms that Kepler looks like Earth on the outside, but in fact it is not like Earth at all. Maybe I am biased, but I think this ties in nicely to my theory that the core of Kepler is a dark photon reactor. I want to shout out commenter Manabu Higa for suggesting that the planet may be a Dyson sphere, which is sort of like a scaffolding built around a star in order to harness its power. Kepler's outer layer may be built to harness the dark photon energy in the core, and it has just taken on the appearance of a planet after millions of years. Or maybe it was built to look like a planet as a disguise. He also suggested that Sol may be an advanced AI that was set up to run the sphere, but it turned against its creators and forced them off the planet to Earth to start over. A very cool idea.
What can you say about the tropical side?
Well, it's fairly mysterious at this point in the story for sure. We all know, we know that this is sort of the most bountiful place on the planet, so everyone believes. This is where, it seems like whoever is able to plant their flag and really, stake their claim to the tropical zone may become the dominant force on this planet, forever, kind of thing. It's like that book, Guns, Germs, and Steel about Earth, and the idea of, where people, just by chance end up evolving on our planet geographically, and what they have there, what materials and weather and all of these things that, kind of come into play. Then, thousands of years later, they end up, dominating the planet because of it. And these folks coming to Kepler know that quite well, so they're trying to stake their claim to the tropical zone. Though, of course, the tropical zone also has this other weird attribute, which is the electromagnetic field that prevents anyone from landing directly in the tropical zone, which also plays into your earlier question, I think, about different sides of the planet and the voice and things like that, and how these things might interact with each other.
The more he talks about different sides of the planet, the more I'm thinking the planet is a giant version of the pentagonal temples we are seeing, with Dyson sphere being a very real possibility. The electromagnetic field over the tropical zone could be generated by the 5 temples working together, or by just the one temple in that area. There is definitely some dark photon farming going on Kepler, creating, as Aaron calls it, a haunted house for the newest guests.
Is ship always going to arrive in the finale? Could be thousands of people. It could be 10 people.
Exactly. So we don't really know. We also kind of got the impression that the atheists weren't as advanced as the Mithraic. The Mithraic had all of these, like quantum gravity, propulsion machine. That stuff was in their scriptures as well. One thing I will say about season 2 is that this ship was actually built by the Mithraic. It was hijacked while it was under construction on Earth. So the people aboard the ship are in fact atheists, but again, in terms of the technology, it's more Mithraic stuff.
Confirmation that all this technology came from the Mithraic scriptures, which seem to have definitely come from Kepler, which explains why the ark getting closer to Kepler and eventually crash landing on Kepler seemed to jumpstart Sol. Now with another Mithraic ark on the planet, but driven by atheists, Sol will have even more power to play with. I hope you enjoyed my breakdown of this interview. Collider Interviews did an amazing job with the questions, and you should definitely all subscribe to their channel. They put out some awesome content all the time. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my Raised by Wolves videos during the break between seasons. And please leave your thoughts and theories in the comments so we can keep the conversation going. Once again, I'm Brent the Middleman. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you